Our next guest is Alex Kajitani. He is the 2009 California Teacher of the Year, a top 4 finalist for National Teacher of the Year, and the author of several books, including Owning It, which was recently named recommended reading by the U.S. Department of Education. And his newest book, which is for new teachers, You're a Teacher Now, What's Next, which is receiving rave reviews. He's a highly sought after educational speaker, and he's known around the world as the Rappin Mathematician. He has a popular TED Talk and was honored at the White House. He is also featured on the CBS Evening News with Katie Court, and she explained, I love this guy, and you will too. Well, welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thanks so much. What an honor it is to be with you today.
I'm really happy to connect. I've seen you as a keynote speaker at a middle school conference, and really enjoyed hearing from you with what applies to any teacher in general. But we're going to start off with the trench story. And for anybody who's not aware of kind of how you got started and as an author, came all from this trench story.
That's right. Yeah, you mentioned in the intro that I am known around the world now as the Rappin Mathematician, but it did not start out that way. In fact, I'd started deep, deep in the trenches. I was a new teacher just, many years ago, absolutely struggling to survive in my classroom. I couldn't seem to get my students to pay attention or sit still in their seats, and I certainly couldn't get them to, remember the math I had just taught them 5 minutes ago. But what I realized is a rap song would come out on Monday, and by Tuesday, they seemed to have every single word memorized. And so I thought, okay, I got to play on this strength, right? And so one day we were studying adding and subtracting decimals. I wrote a rap song. I went home, I wrote a rap song about adding decimals called the Itty Bitty Dot, about the decimal point. And I went home, I practiced all night, I will admit, in front of my mirror. And I thought, I am so going to be the man when I come into school tomorrow. Now, if you know anything about middle school, as most of your listeners do, let's just say I was not the man. It was a complete disaster. The students came in, I hit play, I busted out the itty bitty dot, and they started laughing at me hysterically. And so I just thought, okay, well, I see where my career is going. Yesterday they were laughing at me. Today, tomorrow I'll be looking for a new job. And so I kind of blew it off and went about my day. And then a really interesting thing happened later. I was walking to the teacher's lounge for lunch. I walked by the student lunch tables and they were all singing the Itty Bitty Dot. And the next day they came excited to be in class, and they said I needed to start recording my songs and making rap music videos. And I started calling myself the Rappin Mathematician. And it's hard to believe those videos have gotten, or over, some of them have gotten over 250,000 views on YouTube and are being used in homes and classrooms all over the world now to engage kids in math and make math cool. But it really all started, like you said, in the trenches with a teacher's desperate attempt to connect with their students. And I've just kind of been math rapping ever since.
And like that wasn't very long lived, that frustration when the kids were acting like it wasn't cool. Maybe they just didn't want to show their peers that they actually liked the song, right?
I'll tell you, one of the things that I've learned in many, many years of especially teaching middle school is that being cool really means being comfortable with who you are and with what you do. And if you are comfortable with who you are, if you as a teacher act like something is really cool, eventually to the students, it's going to be, because they're, as Ralph Waldo Emerson, the writer, once said, that which we are all the while teaching. And so, if you truly believe something is cool, you act like it's cool and you totally own it, it's gonna very quickly become cool to our students. And that's kind of how it works in middle school. But it also is, I think, just a really important lesson for so many of us who are teaching, which is own it, act like it's cool, and it will be.
And as I mentioned in the bio, that is the title of your newest book, Owning It. You're a Teacher Now, What's Next? So that is coming out now in February. So talk to me about the book, and could principals or teacher coaches benefit from owning this book and learn some tips for their new teachers as well?
Yeah, so it's actually two different books. Owning It was a book that came out several years ago. and really excited. That was when it came out. That was named recommended reading by the U.S. Department of Education, and that is a book that really focuses on practical strategies that are immediately implementable for teachers.
Okay.
Uh, they can use in the classroom to be highly effective in the classroom as teachers. There's also a special section on really what we call the hard to reach students. It's got a section on how to be highly effective on their campuses, right? How do we work with our colleagues? How do we interact with our colleagues and make sure that we're creating a culture on our campuses where everybody feels safe and where they belong and where they can do their best work. And then of course it also dives into the third section of owning it, which is how do we be what I call public professionals? Teachers are we're very public in that a lot of people see what we do, right? Students see what we do, parents are hearing about what we do. And so how do we sort of balance our role as people who are out there in the public eye? It's no secret that teachers sometimes are kind of getting hammered on in the press these days. So how do we balance that with living lives that are fulfilling and rich and where we avoid burnout as well? And so owning it has become very popular. And then my new book, which comes out this week, is specifically for new teachers, and that's called You're a Teacher Now, What's Next? And that's with my co-author, Tom Hirk. Tom is kind of a legendary Canadian educator who works a lot now consulting with schools and districts across the United States and Canada. He was actually named recently as one of the top 10 global gurus in education. But the two of us have spent the past several years working directly with new teachers in their classrooms. And we were having these incredible conversations about the questions they were asking, what they were struggling with, and what they needed. And so we combined forces to write this book. And it really is, it's a fun conversational, written in a conversational tone that just feels like you're having a cup of coffee with a trusted colleague. But what we really do is aim to answer the questions that new teachers are asking in their first few years. How do I manage my classroom? How do I set up my classroom for success? What do I do when students don't behave the way I want them to behave? How do I know that students have even learned? How do I interact with my colleagues? How do I build a career that is sustainable and one that I will enjoy and love and not get burned out in? And so, the book is really written, like I said, specifically for new teachers, and it's just straightforward advice, stuff you can do immediately. And of course, stay inspired and love what you do as well.
Yeah, and I think there's never too many books out there for new teachers to kind of learn like the challenges of today. And I know that you have had an endorsement by Wong, right? That was the new teacher book when I started teaching, right?
Me
Back in the
too.
late
Yeah.
90s. Right? And I know a lot of people still look to Harry Wong, but like now that it's changed, right? The kids are, there's discipline issues, but it looks different than 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. So, I'm glad that you've gone and you've researched a little bit as well. May I ask, was that research post pandemic, kind of before and after that you all spent time in those classrooms?
Yeah, most of it was after. I
Okay.
mean, I've been working as a coach and as a consultant for many years now, and so even with the school district as a new teacher support, and so I've seen pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and now I don't know if I guess you call it post-pandemic, although we're sort of still dealing with COVID and things like that. But most of the time that I've spent in classrooms coaching new teachers in their classrooms in real time has happened post pandemic. And so it really gave me an opportunity to see, kind of both the differences pre and post pandemic, but as well as the evolution of, you know, what students are dealing with, as well as what teachers are confronted with as well. And so, the truth is, as a profession, teach as I travel the country, teachers all over are saying, geez, it seems like the students are so much different now. It seems like, you know, a lot of teachers are reporting much different and sometimes often extreme behavior from students. And so the challenges have gotten, you know, not to oversimplify it, but the challenges have gotten even more challenging. At the same time, what we're seeing are teacher shortages. And so, you know, in order to respond to that, a lot of teachers are coming into the profession with emergency credentials or what we call alternative certifications. And so they haven't necessarily done their student teaching. They don't necessarily have a teaching credential. They're coming in on emergency certifications and they're walking into classrooms and are overwhelmed at the sheer magnitude and demands of being a teacher. And so that's really why we wrote this book. You know, or one of the reasons we wrote this book, You're a Teacher Now, What's Next, which is exactly to answer that question. Something, you know, it's a book that you can just hand a new teacher on the way in or on the way out of getting hired and say, hey, here's something that you can start with. And it's filled with, you know, practical, implementable ideas that really work based on years of research, not only post-pandemic, but in all of not all of the years, but in many of the years leading up to it as well.
I would add to that group, you're saying those emergency credential teachers. We also have a lot of long-term subs in buildings, and when we're unable to fill positions, and some of those people they're on their second or third career, and they might have worked in some type of service industry, and maybe sign on to be a daily sub, but we need them now as a long-term sub. So I'm sure that would be a helpful book for people who haven't taught before who are now doing a long-term sub gig as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, really what it is it's a book that is rooted in what highly effective teaching is and what is needed in order to be a highly effective educator who loves what they do. And, you know, whether that is your very first teaching experience, whether it means you've been around for a while as a sub, or maybe even a veteran teacher, I think, you know, even the highest level of principles are still rooted in good common sense. They're still rooted in foundational skills. And, you know, just as we see the world's top athletes constantly paying attention to and focusing on the fundamentals, you know, the world's greatest teachers are constantly rooting their pedagogical practice in strong fundamentals as well. And that's really what this book is, you know, is solid in.
And I wanted to highlight as well that during the pandemic, you wrote a book about teaching online, which almost everybody did for a year and a half. But there are still people like me who have a side gig and tutor online, or they might teach homeschoolers online. So, could you tell a little bit about that book and how it might give tips for people who make teaching online their main gig?
Yeah, I had so much fun writing that book. It's called 101 Tips for Teaching Online. And that's exactly what it is. It's 101 just practical, simple tips for teaching online. Look, I think, you know, when the pandemic shutdown happened and so many teachers, most teachers were sort of forced to adapt their teaching and suddenly, you know, be online teachers. We found that some of it was the same. Some of it was this, some of, you know, really good teaching was rooted in the practices and the principles and the strategies that we had always used. Some of it, however, we found was totally different. And so we needed to learn some new skills. And you know, how do we keep students engaged when there is a screen between us? How do I create a collaborative culture where students really feel like they belong, but in a virtual environment where they're not actually sitting shoulder to shoulder with some of their students or some of their colleagues? And so it was just a really fun book. I went out and I found the absolute best online teachers that were out there. I interviewed lots of them. I had some of my own experiences teaching online, and I really put together 101 of the best practices. Again, really easy to implement, really fun stuff that you can do in order to be highly effective, whether you're teaching virtually. And, you know, it transfers, of course, into the in-person classroom. But I really wanted to focus on that. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, I watched my own kids start being students, you know, in virtual classrooms during the pandemic. And my kids still take online classes now sometimes. And, you know, you can really see just like in an in-person classroom, it varies from teacher to teacher. Some teachers are highly effective and the students love being in their classroom. Some, well, let's just say not so much. But it really is, we can, just like we can teach, we can learn as well. And so we're constantly evolving and learning to be teachers, and that includes online as well. And the pandemic may be over or maybe on its way out, but and virtual teaching may not be as popular or as widespread as it was, but being able to teach virtually is never going away, and it's a skill that we're always going to need, always going to be able to fall back on, whether it's during a snow shutdown, or God forbid the next pandemic, or any, for whatever reason that we might need to be able to access our teaching virtually. And so I think it's still and will remain an important book. And like I said, it's just a bunch of fun tips that anyone can use to teach online.
Like you pointed out, it was there way before the pandemic and it's not going away. And especially for those educators who might teach a college course, right? There's a lot of those opportunities to do adjunct courses and teach online as well, not only for the K-12 students, but also if you're wanting to teach bachelor's level courses. So,
Yeah, well, and
yeah,
I
that's
no, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting as well, because as we saw this sudden shift to virtual teaching through with, K-12 schools, and then we saw it sort of roar back to in-person teaching. But then at the same time, what we saw companies start to evolve to more virtual work, right? A lot of workers, a lot of employees went, "Hey, wait a minute. I don't actually need to be in the office every single day or Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 kind of thing. I can get a lot of this work done virtually, and I can do it in at least an alternative setting." And so what I would hate to see is for companies and for the work world to evolve forward into implementing more virtual practices, but then see our school system, which trains our students to be employees in these companies, I'd hate to see that go back to only in person. I'd really love to see us be able to sustain both the virtual and the in-person blended options, both in our schools as well as in our companies and in our working world. Because, just as the working world, or just as the working world and the school world, tie into each other, I'd love to see them reflect each other as well in terms of what we're doing all day or night or whenever.
Yeah, because like for virtual teaching, I've had students in Hong Kong. I have had currently have students in Europe, right? And you can teach them whenever. I mean, whenever
Yeah.
fits your schedule, right? But like that's true with many sectors that can do things online as well. Like if you have a flexible schedule and want to get your hours in a certain time, that works. So you mentioned that you're no longer in the classroom, so you have left middle school teaching and you're doing a lot of coaching and speaking engagement. So tell us what you have lined up for spring and summer of 24.
Yeah, it's so exciting. It was such a difficult decision. I was able to take a leave of absence from my school district, but I really had this opportunity to go out and, I like to think of it as, I haven't left the classroom. I just have a much bigger classroom now. And so, whereas I was affecting the lives of 30 students, now when I talk to 30 teachers who have 30 students, now I'm impacting the lives of, you know, 900 students. And so I really am so excited about this new sort of direction where I'm getting to go out, travel. I get to see how schools operate, in Minnesota and in Alaska and all over the country, and talk with teachers and really find out, okay, what are we dealing with, not just in our own schools, but nationwide as a profession, and what are some of the solutions and the approaches that are really working. And so, gosh, I've got everything lined up this spring and summer, from, conferences, keynoting conferences. I love to keynote a conference as well as do breakout sessions. I'll be doing those for everywhere from, from coast to coast. I also love going and working with teachers. Sometimes I go work with, math teachers specifically in a school. And then I love doing back to school convocations, especially around the summertime, where, getting teachers ready for the school year ahead. My motto is no crowd too small or large. So whether it's sitting in a cafeteria working with 5 teachers on how to write effective lesson plans to, keynoting a conference in a fancy hotel with, thousands of educators. I love them all and try to bring the same energy and passion levels that to all of them, regardless of the number of people or the topics that I'm speaking on.
Talked about the fact that you've written about and some of the coaching you do is supporting new teachers, but you also wanted to talk a little bit about how you coach teachers on building relationships with students. And I think whether teachers teaching in person or virtually, it's so important. But we have students, you and I have both taught at the secondary level, and um, some of these social emotional supports are strong at the elementary level, but by the time students get to the secondary level, those aren't always in place school wide. Like a homeroom or advisory class might not have that opportunity. So, talk to me a little bit at how teachers that you work with, how you're coaching them on relationship building, especially when we have kids that are new throughout the year sometimes, and just keeping our students engaged. When we build those relationships, it helps keep them more engaged as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a critical aspect of teaching and really of life. I think we talk so much about relationships and building relationships, but when, what is a relationship, right? We talk about it all the time. And so, when I talk to audiences of educators, I say, hey, what is a relationship? And I can get, all sorts of different answers. And really what a relationship is it's a connection, right? You can have connections that are growing, you can have connections that are falling apart. But what we know for sure is that really strong relationships are really built on 3 principles. First, you got to spend time together, right? There's no shortcuts on this. And it can be virtual, it can be in person, but you have to spend live time together, interacting, reacting to each other in order for that relationship to be built. You can't just watch YouTube videos of somebody and think that you have a relationship with them. That's not an actual connection and relationship. Second, strong relationships are built on what I call be interested and be interesting, right? We've all had the experience of being in a relationship where maybe we were very interested in someone, they weren't so interested in us, right? Truly strong relationships mean that, with our students are very interesting people. And so we've got to be interested in them. At the same time, we as educators are extremely interesting people. And so we've got to make sure that they know a little bit about us and that they're interested in us. And then third, strong relationships are built on trust. And I heard this definition of trust recently that I thought was so remarkable. And it is that trust is confidence with the unknown. Let me say that one more time. Trust is confidence with the unknown. If there is one thing we've learned in the past few years, it's really that we don't know what's going to happen, right? We don't know what's going to happen next week. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen later today. But when our students know that we've got their back, when we know that our colleagues have our back, that whatever happens, we're going to get through it and we're going to be okay. When we've got confidence in that unknown, that's really where strong trust develops. And those components, those ingredients are so critical to building relationships. And so, that being said, with our students, there really are 4 relationships that are happening in classrooms all the time, right? There's the relationship with themselves. There's the relationship with other students. I mean, very hard to focus on how to add fractions with unlike denominators when you've just gotten in a fight with your friend on the playground, right? There's the student's relationship with the content. Some of our students, they walk in loving what we have to teach. Some of them are, hating what we have to teach or thinking that they hate what we have to teach. And then of course there's the relationship with the adults in the building and that's all of us. And so, I think that it's being able to identify that there are multiple relationships that are happening all the time is so, so critical. And of course, as adults, we've got to really take, employ some effective strategies on how to build relationships with students. And so I can talk all day about those if you want, but I'll let you get a word in. You got me started. Now I'm off and running. But go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Like you said, it's really honing in on those relationships. Um, and I think something that I'm seeing where I'm currently working is really both with that uh, the other students and with the content, right? And I think when you told us about your trench story and the fact that they didn't act like they liked the song initially, I think that's especially at the middle school level. A lot of the time, like they might be interested in the content, however, they don't think it's cool to show that they know, right? And so, how can maybe a teacher help those students hone in a little bit more if he or she sees the student has that aptitude, but they're maybe not putting forth their best selves with the content because of maybe peer pressure or they don't want to look so smart.
Yeah, that's a great, great question. So one of the things that I talk about all the time is that, we all know that it's important to know our students, right? To know our students, to know something about them, to know about their interests. But that's not enough, right? What I advise, or what I some of the advice I always give teachers is to just know one thing about your students, one interest of theirs, right? But you can't just stop there. In order to really build an effective relationship, you have to bring it up from time to time. So let's say that one of your students, Elisa, loves cooking, right? It's great to know that. But when you go to teach fractions, you got to take that extra moment and go, hey, Elisa, I know you love to cook. We're going to talk about fractions today. Fractions and combining different fractions are such a huge part of cooking. You are going to love today's lesson. Just taking that moment to make that connection between the content and the lives of our students changes everything. As I like to say, stop trying to take the content and forcing it into our students' lives, and instead start with our students' lives and see where it fits into the content, right? And just making that flip changes everything, because then you put the student at the center of the learning as opposed to, whatever subject we're teaching and then spending your time trying to convince them that it's something that they need in their life. I'll tell you a funny story. I play a game with my students called Stump Mr. Alex, and all the students have to do is they can bring up any topic they want, but they have to try to stump me, and they have to think of something that I cannot somehow relate to mathematics. And if they can think of something that I can't somehow relate to math, they can win a prize. And so, same stuff every year. They bring up ketchup, and we talk about calories and cost production, or my students are really into soccer, so we talk about distance and angles and keeping score. But I will admit, once I was almost stumped. A student said, Mr. Kajitani, I know something that has nothing to do with math. I said, what? They said, love. I said, huh. And I couldn't think of anything. And just as I was about to admit defeat and hand out prizes, another student said, I know what love has to do with math. I said, what? They said, when you're in love, that could be very expensive. And another student said, I know, I know. I said, what? They said, in math, 1 + 1 = 2. But if you're in love and you're not careful, 1 + 1 could equal 3. Of course, that's when I had to use two words all teachers must at some point use: moving on. But, like I said, what the students love playing this game, because instead of taking the math and trying to see where it fits into their lives, we start with their life and see where it fits into the math. And that can be played with, any subject, really. If you're a language arts teacher, see if you can relate everything to language arts or history, science, whatever you're teaching. It's not just limited to math. But again, what it really does, it builds that relationship with the students, that the stuff we are teaching is so much more than just something in a textbook, something on a test, but it is part of their everyday lives and world.
Yeah, that's so important to remember. And I like that example about picking out what students like and their interest, and then relating it to what your lesson is about, right? And really helping those students who might not get that connection with other teachers that they have. But like I said, at the secondary level, when they have around 7 different teachers.
For
Uh,
sure.
we've had a great conversation today about some of your books, about how you got out of the trenches, and some of the topics that you train and work with teachers on. Out of everything we've talked about today, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Well, I think it's just really, really critical to remember that, build those relationships with the students. Stop trying to take the curriculum and forcing it into the students' lives. Instead, take our students' lives, put it into the curriculum, and that's when real relationships are built.
So important. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
Absolutely. Anytime. Please, please, please. I never want to be the podcast guest who people hear from and they never hear from them again. So feel free. You can reach out to me through my website on the contact page. It's alexkajitani.com. That's AlexKajitani.com. You can check out all of my books, all of my videos, things like that. And I will also say that I'm on a mission to help every kid master their times tables. So I have a totally free program, very popular, called Multiplication Nation that you can sign up for on my website. And it's just a really fun program that helps kids master their times tables. Like I said, totally free for everyone, everywhere in the world. I will not stop until every kid masters those times tables. And this is a way to just do it in a fun way. But check out alexkajitani.com. Hit me up. I answer every message I ever get. Well, I should say that's intentionally sent to me. And thank you, Dana, for just doing the work that you're doing. I know podcasting is not easy, but I see you out there grinding it out every time. And so kudos to you. And thanks to all your listeners for joining us.
Thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today.
Thanks so much.